Now, we've talked about college football, we've talked about the NBA, but I kind of want to move on to the NFL for one little topic, and that is that of the generational prospect moniker that has especially, we see it in the NBA as well with guys like Wemby come in and, they're the best prospect since LeBron James or, Zion Williamson a couple years before that. And we also see it in the NFL, and that's what we're going to talk about right now, especially with the quarterback position, because that is the most prestigious and most storied position. That is the quarterback. And most recently, we've seen that moniker go to guys like Caleb Williams, Joe Burrow, and Trevor Lawrence. And that is three guys since 2020 that have gotten that moniker of generational prospect. And some guys are they go in, they're able to thrive because of it, and, they get more attention, maybe more than they get due to their play just because of that label that they've been given. Maybe some other really deserving players overlooked by a little bit more average player, but since he was considered to be a generational prospect, we talk about him more in the media. And at the end of the day, it's a business, right? So they're going to talk about what gets the most clicks. And so sometimes that happens. Or otherwise, a player is just kind of average, and they're perceived as disappointing because they were considered to be a generational prospect, even if they are a solid player. And then sometimes they're still figuring out a guy like Caleb Williams. Or maybe, you set them up for failure to have a bad first few weeks, and then they're a bust, even though this is just the first few weeks that they've been a pro. So we're just going to take a look at Lawrence, and then we're going to talk about Caleb Williams, and we'll talk about Joe Burrow, just because, the Bears and the Jags had a game today. So I think it's just logical to go in that order from T-Law to Caleb, even though Burrow came in between in terms of draft order. So for Trevor Lawrence, he's been an average to mediocre. Mediocre, sometimes it kind of gets used in the wrong context. That's kind of middle of the pack, and sometimes people use it as outright bad. No, T-Law's been a mediocre quarterback in the league, but he hasn't been an outright bad QB, aside from the first year. But we kind of excuse that because he had Urban Meyer as the head coach, and as we've seen, Meyer just kind of, the circumstances around that, he just wasn't the right fit and not a good NFL head coach. But for Trevor Lawrence, he's been just absurdly average as an NFL quarterback, and he just made a lot of money on a huge contract. And that's kind of seen as overpaid because he hasn't lived up to the expectation that was given to him as the best prospect since Andrew Luck. The Jags have had a ton of playoff success under T-Law, and his performances haven't always been the best. So for him, he hasn't had a star-making moment, right? But he hasn't been a bad quarterback. However, because of the fact that he was seen as a generational prospect, his performances is seen in a more negative light than a guy that was, undrafted and did the same stuff. T-Law adds the same amount of value to your football team as someone who put up the same production as him, but because he was seen as a generational prospect, then all of a sudden, he's seen as more of a disappointment, and that's not on him, right? I think the negative perception around Trevor Lawrence isn't all his fault. It's not his fault the media saw him as the guy that was going to turn the Jaguars around, because the Jaguars have not been an organization that is known to be well managed, right? So he was expected to come in and turn things around, and he hasn't necessarily done that. He's been a mediocre quarterback, and that's seen as really disappointing. But I think if Trevor Lawrence, if Trevor Lawrence was a 7th round pick and he was doing the same stuff, that he would be a great story. But he's not. And that's because of the fact that he was considered to be a generational prospect. And that alters our perception of them so much. And I think Lawrence is a prime example of that. He makes a ton of money. He's deemed overpaid because he's been average, but he makes that money because of his potential as a prospect. And so the perception of him goes down to how we viewed him back in college. And I think at some point we've just got to take a look at Lawrence. He's not that same generational prospect at this point. So we just have to take a look and judge him by how he plays in the NFL. And right now that's as an average QB. And that's okay. He still has a spot in the league. We don't need to call for his head. But at the same time, we also don't need to have sky-high expectations for him anymore. And that's okay. But it's time we move on from the generational prospect label guy to be given that label is Caleb Williams. And I've said it previously throughout the first few weeks of the NFL season, Caleb looked like a really, really raw prospect in terms of his play. He wasn't really doing much. And I thought that we kind of failed him for the same thing. We set him up for failure because we called him a generational prospect. And now Caleb's playing a little bit better, and now he's getting a lot of attention, right? And good for him. That is great that he's performing a lot better. I never want to wish failure upon anyone, right? It's better when everyone is succeeding. But for Caleb, those first few weeks, we were really disappointed. And I think the reason people were disappointed was, because he was considered to be a generational prospect. But guess what? He's still a rookie in the NFL. And especially at the quarterback position, that is such a learning curve that unless you're Justin Herbert, Baker Mayfield, there's very few exceptions. You don't really come in and immediately, CJ Stroud, you don't come in and immediately be that guy. And Caleb Williams didn't come in and immediately be that guy. And that's okay. And now, as we've seen over the past couple of weeks, now that he's got some more reps under his belt, now that he's had more practices with the NFL team over the course of the season, and we've watched game film, and he's figured out what he can do better, Caleb Williams has been a better quarterback. And it shows that it takes time. And over the following seasons, he'll be even better. So for Caleb, I think the reason we point out generational prospect for him today is the fact that it gave him instant expectations. He didn't live up to that throughout the first few weeks, but now he's playing well, and he's maybe not living up to the moniker because as a rookie, no one really is. But for Caleb, we just got to take into account his improvements and not expect him to be the best quarterback in the league from week one of his rookie year, right? And I think, you just set him up to have sky-high expectations. And once again, like T-Law, maybe he doesn't live up to that. But there is a learning curve, especially as a rookie. And so Caleb is going to be absolutely fine. And he's shown these past couple of weeks that he can be a really, really good quarterback. 226 passing yards this week, 4 touchdowns, 1 pick. He's been really good over the past couple of weeks, and Caleb is going to be on a very, very good trajectory. And a lot of the general public overreacted because they saw him as a generational prospect. And, the casual media might be like, hey, why is he not instantly producing? But that is because he's a rookie, and there's a huge learning curve. So that's my example for Joe Burrow, because he had that amazing season at LSU, setting so many records. 60 passing touchdowns to 6 picks. 10-to-1 ratio is crazy. So before that year, he wasn't really seen as much of a high-end NFL prospect. But after that, he shot out the boards. He was definitively the number 1 pick. And for Burrow, I want to talk about how the generational prospect moniker can kind of overshadow the play of someone else. Because that same year, in that 2021 NFL draft, Justin Herbert was the number 6 pick to the LA Chargers. And he would go on to set the rookie passing touchdown record that season. But, so obviously, Herbert had a great, amazing rookie year, one of the best rookie quarterbacks that we've ever seen. And Burrow, he was really, really solid as a rookie. Ultimately, he got hurt, but he was solid, although his play wasn't really up to the same level as Justin Herbert. However, he was still perceived as his favorite for a long time, really up until he got injured, to be the Rookie of the Year. And that's just because of the fact that he was getting a lot more attention than Herbert, because Burrow was seen as a generational prospect. And for him, he was living up to the expectations of being a good quarterback. But Herbert was having a great rookie year. Ultimately, he won. But part of that was down to Burrow getting injured. And for Herbert, we kind of didn't look at him the same way that we looked at Burrow, because Herbert wasn't this generational prospect. He was seen as more of a project quarterback. So we just didn't perceive him the same way as Burrow. All the lights were on Burrow. And while Herbert had a better rookie year through, I believe it was 11 weeks when Burrow got injured, while Herbert was having a better rookie year, Burrow was still seen as the Rookie of the Year pick by most media outlets, most betting sites, whatever it might be, because we had all the attention on him as a generational prospect. And it just kind of shows that you can, overshadow another guy. And that's just harmful to his play, right? Because now Burrow has to live up to this expectation. And also, he's less motivated to live up to that because of the fact that, hey, no matter what he does, he's still going to be looked at really highly because he has sky high potential as a so-called generational prospect, and it lets Herbert kind of be demotivated and demoralized because no matter what he does, is he going to be enough? Is he going to be seen as on par, if not better, in that rookie season than Joe Burrow? What more does he have to do, right? So I think that just kind of shows how at times a generational prospect moniker can overshadow someone. So those were just a couple examples from Caleb Williams to T-Law to Joe Burrow, just kind of going over various cases of the generational prospect thing and how it can have different effects on people, whether, it's kind of having instant expectations or being an average quarterback, but that's kind of disappointing for T-Law, or, overshadowing another, as I just talked about with Burrow and Herbert. I just think it's a very interesting topic, and it's very nuanced as well. So that's just something I want to talk about for sure.